may start some stories sometime later in the future, they also price you accordingly. So they let you money fine, but you also pay a commensurate cost for it. Now the other thing I want you to look at is this. You can talk to China and they agree. China, you know, people imagine China is the #1 lender to Kenya. No, that's not true. The Kenyan debt to Kenya, the Chinese debt to Kenya is actually less than 10%. It's only that Chinese debt is usually project finance, which is more expensive, and commercial. So they become more expensive. But there are some other parameters I provoke you to go and check. Out of our CFS, payments of interest rates of 1 trillion, approximately. 750 billion this current financial year. It is now over 800 billion. The one we budgeted was 750. I think it's now hovering around 800 billion by close of the year. But let me use 750. Please get this point. 1 trillion shillings is for payment of interest rate. 750 billion is for domestic debt servicing. So, external debt, we are talking about around 200 billion shillings. There is a point I want to derive there. Now, issues around talking about debt. You know, when I'm talking about debt, I'm talking about changing terms, because I am sure 100% we may end up there as a country. So when you talk about changing terms of debt, you may change externally. Now come now back home. 750 billion is the biggest ticket of payment of interest rate in our country, in our economy. Now, can you start thinking as a Kenyan what that is? Can you imagine a meeting being called by the National Treasury at some point? Like the way we are here, there is a meeting that has been convened. Nimewaita tuongee mambo ya hii deni. Sio kama wa Kenya, lakini wale watu wamekopesha serikali pesa. I want you to start seeing that conversation, what it means. The 750 billion Kenya shillings we are paying domestic interest rate is owed to who? Is owed to banks, is owed to insurance companies, is owed to bond holders, even normal Kenyans. Now, changing terms means what? Are you calling us to increase the yield? What is the likely conversation that is likely to be around there? Is about postponing paying you. That's number one. They can only be two things actually. Postponing paying you, that's number one, or paying you less. Now think about it this way. You are a bank with shareholders expecting you to release results by end of the financial year. Huyo mtu anasema nini akikuita hiyo mkutano? In other words, those are the things that we need to think about, because the dominant thing we have to think about as a country is debt. And I can guarantee you, we can do all the other things correct. Any small indication that we are not able to service is catastrophic more than any other thing we are doing as a country. I think I leave that there. Mumeshika what I'm trying to say. And you know, they say restructuring is the first chapter of default, because the same analogy I gave, if I owe you money, three of you, and I've called you one to talk, what are we talking about? We are talking about I may not pay you next month, I'll pay you 3 months from now. So I'm restructuring. So what if in those 2 months I've not paid you, what have I done? Haven't I defaulted? Now lastly, I want to talk about revenue. There is something called revenue maximizing tax rate. That is a term that should be given a department in the Department of the National Treasury. Revenue maximizing tax rate. You know, many times we confuse that you add tax rate, you get more revenue. It is a fallacy. At some point you get to Rafa's curve and it starts descending. That the more you increase, the more you distort economic decisions. So if I was to buy a car, I see you've already paying for my money, so I hold back that expenditure. Holding back that expenditure means even the retro you could have gotten, you'll not get it. That is something I have seen we have also to take very seriously as a country. So that even as we make tax policies and revenue policies, let's look, and it cannot be arbitrary. I mean, you cannot just sit down and say, now tunapeleka hii kodi hapa, you get more money. There has to be some research based on it. There has to be some thorough analysis based on it. There has to be thorough sampling. There has to be thorough work in it by coming up with a rate that maximizes revenue without making people distort their economic decisions or market to distort its decision making. We did the finance bill of 2023, which was fairly debated as the one for last year. Now, this is the most shocking thing. The Kenyan revenue to GDP ratio in the year 2023-2024 was around 16%. I want you to see the trend. In the year 2019-2020 was around 15%. In the year 2023, that year, was 14-point-something%. In this current year, up to date, it is around 14.7%. Now, when you do robust revenue-raising measures in terms of policy, they should come with commensurate revenue from it. Kodi ikiongezewa, for example, pay, there should be commensurate revenue in the basket of revenue from this money you have taxed. Tunashikana hapo? Why is it that even when you raise the rate, then in the basket of money, there is not that money? Why is it that the revenue growth in Kenya never noticed finance bill of 2023? That the graph, if you are given a graph without labeling, you will not pinpoint those 2 years. You will not see them. Because the revenue never changed other than the ordinary changes it usually has. I'm talking about that analysis of revenue maximizing tax rate. Why is it that even when we have a very corrosive, when we have a very debatable policy around tax and it passes, why is it that we cannot see this money in the other side? Possibly this could be the reason. You come, maybe you are earning some money here, the government takes it at the payee level. Napenda kuita unakatia stima kwa transformer. You know, when money is deducted from your payee, ni kama stima imekatiwa kwa transformer. So it actually never reaches your hands. Now when you cut money from the payee level, when you cut money at that level, let's say in my disposable income, you already knock off 8,000 shillings from it. That is the money you are sending your uncle somewhere in Nyamira. That is the money you are sending your auntie somewhere in Kisii. Now, you no longer send them that money. So they no longer buy that sugar they were buying through the transfer you are doing. So you have cut money here at the payee level, but the same money denies you correction at the VAT level. Those are some of the things we have to work around, so that even as we increase taxes, then we are not handicapping the same revenue collection. There is another thing I want to talk about very briefly, which you have to be vigilant as a country. In Nigeria is one of the economies, by the way, which are very good. It has very rich people in terms of, in Africa, you only get black billionaires, majority of them being domiciled in Lagos, Nigeria, out of Nigerian money. Now, Dagote cement, BOA cement, They grew around what? You come and put in some duty for imports of the commodities they manufacture, primarily cement by that time. When you put duty on cement, I'm using Nigeria, you end up having a big conglomerate and several of them. Number one, of course, we know Dangote Cement, BOA Cement, there is also Lafarge and the others. So now, you cut off imports. It's a good thing, fine. The question is, for how long? You cutting off meaning you build a wall of tariff. Not necessarily a non-tariff barrier, but a tariff one. So you put in a wall. This wall should incentivize this local production to be efficient so that their products can compete with the global ones. But then you overstay with that policy. So Nigeria, by beginning of this year, had the highest cement prices in Africa. Can you see that oxymoron? The biggest producers had the highest cement prices in Africa and had the highest cement margins almost in the world. You protect an industry that must come in with an analysis for how long, and there should be government follow-up on when we protect you, up to when can Kenyans continue to pay more for you to get efficient. Because I am here as a consumer in Kenya. The cement prices in Kenya today have gone up. So what am I doing as a Kenyan buyer of cement? I am actually subsidizing as a Kenyan the production of the producer of cement. I am paying a higher price. It is a good thing.